Thanks for listening to the Drummers Weekly Groovecast. You can contact the show at twitter.com/DW Groovecast and through Facebook at facebook.com/Drummers Weekly Groovecast.
Good evening.
I am warning you right now, if you touch my drums, I will stab you in the neck with a knife.
Ain't it funky? Ain't it funky?
Mom!
Take it easy. Lower it.
I'm not gonna lower it. I have to do this now.
I don't mind you playing it, but lower it.
Well,
We get straightened out?
No, we had a problem. I mean, we tried to do everything we could.
What do you mean?
Well, you know what I mean.
Little trouble there. You're rushing.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
Hello, denizens of Groovecastistan. Phil here from the Drummers Weekly Groovecast. Before we get into today's topic and today's guest, I would like to take a few minutes and recognize the passing of the legendary Roy Burns. Most of you who may not be familiar with his playing career definitely recognize him as being the driving force behind Aquarian Drumheads. He passed away this last week on Saturday, May the 5th, and it is truly an end of an era. He was a one-of-a-kind kind of guy. He really was. I knew him since the late 80s when, as a kid, I took a few lessons from Roy, and ultimately in the late 90s became an endorser of Aquarian Drumheads, primarily through Roy and Chris Brady, wonderful men. And I just wanted to really draw everyone's attention to this, that if you're not familiar with Roy, please go back and look at some of his playing, some of his performing, some of his clinics. He was a drummer with Woody Herman and Benny Goodman. He also did some work on the Merv Griffin Show and the early iterations of The Tonight Show. He was also a pioneer of drum clinics and just drum education. A wonderful man. And again, started Aquarian in 1980 with Ron Marquez and continued to make just some of the best products and serving the drumming community at its best. And I just want to bring home the fact of what an influence Roy has been on myself and the entire drum community. I want to relate a quick story to you. When I was a kid, probably between 18 and 19 years old, I had my first lesson with Roy when he was doing a clinic tour and promoting Aquarian Drumheads at the same time. I took a private lesson with him, and he gave me what I call 2 magic bullets of drumming. And I take these pieces of information with me everywhere I go, every time I step into the studio, every time I'm on the bandstand, every time I'm in a lesson. And a couple of things he showed me. He said, "Son, play me an up-tempo pattern on the hi-hat." And I played an up-tempo swing pattern on the hi-hat. And he's like, "Look, you're doing yourself a disservice and it doesn't sound great if you play it using your foot for the open and closing." And he showed me the old trick of having the cymbals open, about 1/4 of an inch, holding the hi-hats with your left hand to open and close it, I should say, playing that pattern with your right hand. Like I said, everyone knows how to do that now, but I certainly didn't know how to do it when I was 18 years old. And he showed me a couple of great techniques to play a seamless buzz roll with power using a nice elliptical motion with the sticks. It was a great lesson, and I'll never forget it. And then also I'll never forget at being at a NAMM show and living the dream from a standpoint of what everybody wants to happen at a NAMM show, where somebody comes to you and wants to give you some sort of an endorsement deal. Between him and Chris Brady, they gave me a shot with Aquarian back in the late 90s, and I've been with them ever since then. And I remember Roy talking to me when we were finalizing the deal, and he just said, "Son, I know you can play. I don't care that you're not with some big rock band or some popular band." He goes, "That's not what I do with endorsements. Of course, it would be great, if you promoted it in front of tens of millions of people, but one of the endemic problems with endorsements these days is that there's too many people who can't play but have a popular band and they put their name on these products. And that was just not what Roy was about. So he was special in so many ways. And one final thing I want to say about Roy is he authored some of the finest articles that Modern Drummer has ever published. He started a column back in the early 80s called Concepts. I still go back and look at those, and I have actually used the basis of some of his articles for outlines and for ideas for topics for this very show. So Roy Burns, again, just a master educator, wonderful communicator. Our thoughts and prayers are with Chris Brady and the folks out at Aquarian Products out in Anaheim, California. Okay, moving forward, we have a great show today. And it's one of these shows that, like many of our really good shows, they come about by pure happenstance. I met this gentleman, Mr. Ted Mackenzie, in a roundabout fashion. He is a new resident of the Atlanta area. He moved down here probably less than a year ago from upstate New York. And I discovered that he was the reviser of the very famous Henry Adler text, Buddy Rich's Modern Interpretation of Snare Drum Rudiments. For those of you in the know, you probably have this book. It is absolutely one of the best-selling drum method books in the history of our idiom. Ted has a great story about, one, taking lessons from Henry Adler, getting to know him, and then also many, many years later, having a chance run-in with one of the world's biggest music publishers, and how he ended up getting the job of revising this book. And it just goes on, and he talks about his other writings and his companion books and companion methods to this book. So without any further delay, we're going to listen to a little bit of Ted Mackenzie's own performance from a duo CD featuring Dan Dobeck and the aforementioned Ted Mackenzie, Two Sons of Thunder. It is my sincere pleasure today to welcome into the Drummers Weekly Groovecast studios a true pedagogue. How do you like that intro, Ted?
Wow, what'd you call me?
Pedagogue. Believe me, it's not a slur. It's a good thing on this show. It's one of these shows that's right in my wheelhouse. I am really honored to have a guy that has revised and written a couple of just tremendous must-have methods. And we would like to welcome to the Drummers Weekly Groovecast from upstate New York by way of Dallas, Georgia, Mr. Ted Mackenzie. Ted, thanks for coming by, buddy.
Thank you, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, man, let me tell you, it's our honor to have you. Anytime we can have an author of and a reviser of just some of the Bibles of drumming, we're all about that. We're all about education here.
Well, you're an oasis to me because I've walked into a lot of music stores and with my books and said, "Gee, do you have these books?" Or maybe I could do a clinic here, and there's like zero response, and it's scary. But I think that's where we are today with a lot of this.
I know that's where we are today, and I think that somewhere during this show we ought to talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Talk about the realities of publishing, talk about the realities of education and methods and that type thing, because naturally with the proliferation of technology and videos, there's a lot of chaff, with where a lot of the wheat should be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's going to be interesting to talk about that. So where I would like to start today is talk about how you got involved with revising the Buddy Rich modern interpretation of snare drum rudiments. Naturally, I think that's also going to have a lot to do with your study with the original author, Mr. Henry Adler.
Correct.
So give us a little bit of bio about yourself and how that originated.
Okay. I'm a third-generation drummer. My grandfather, as my namesake, came from Scotland and entered into Philadelphia to settle down, turn of the century. And he married an English woman who we met in America, and they had 3 children. So my dad was the youngest, and when my dad came along, my grandfather had a marching band, and he would march in the streets of Philadelphia, and he trained my father to be a drummer and marched in the streets with him. So my dad ended up continuing drumming and went into jazz idiom. And by the time I came along, they had my mom and dad had 3 sons, and when I was about 5 years old, we lived in Old Greenwich, Connecticut at the time, and suddenly there was all this excitement in the house that my older brother found drums in the attic. And they didn't know anything about this. My dad was not actively playing. So the first thing I saw my dad, he's very smart to put a newspaper on the coffee table, take a pair of wire brushes and play, I'm going, what is going on? I mean, I've heard music, but we'd have jazz in the house, but oh my gosh, there's my dad doing it. And my older brother seemed to take up the brushes, and he seemed to do it right away. But yeah, I was 5. What did I know? So when I tried it, I was like all thumbs, as they say. So anyway, that was my awakening to the drumming. And my dad was careful to put me on a practice pad for, it seemed like years, but maybe months. And
right.
Had to get that double stroke mama dada rolled together. And then he broke out his old Leedy drums, which are from 1929. So it was that big 28-inch bass drum and the snare drum, a foot pedal. He did not have the low boy, but that had just come in. So anyway, I had this old kit, and I would sit behind that thing and do what I thought was right, and he would help me and started playing along to records and that sort of thing. So the way I progressed was I got to Berklee College of Music, and I got there in 66, 67. And I got into Phil Wilson's Dues Band. Now, Phil Wilson, for you who do not know Phil, he's still there, I believe, teaching, is one of the greatest trombonists who ever walked the planet, I believe. And he was a Woody Hermanite, I know. And he was a writer and arranger. And he had his own love for big band, and he would have an extracurricular big band called the Thursday Night Dues Band. And he would handpick the students that he wanted in the band. And I was chosen, and I was blown away that I was chosen to he was going to break me in. The drummer was graduating that year. So I'm in the band, and I'm playing one evening in a Thursday night at the school, and there'd be a lot of students they would let in. They could just watch the band. And one of them was Clyde Brooks. Clyde Brooks ended up being an extremely successful producer in Nashville. Anyway, so Clyde comes up to me after I was packing my drums up to put them away in the storage area, and he said, "Gee, Ted, you play really nice." He said, "But I could really help your technique." I was saying, "Wow, what do you got?" And so we went up to his room, and his dorm. We lived in this. That was in Berkeley. Was like one building, you know.
Yeah.
So we got in his room, and I was a very naive person. Here's the Buddy Rich book on a music stand, and he sits down and he says, "Well, I'm studying with Henry Adler in New York City." Well, his mom, I guess they had some money. His mom would fly him into the city every 2 weeks or something for a lesson. So he starts explaining this method, and this light went on, and I'm thinking, I don't know anything. I know nothing, and I never had this kind of explanation before, etc. So the next thing I did after I finished the year up is I told my dad that I was going to not go back, and I felt that my energy was best spent going to the city, New York City, because we lived 40 minutes out. And I got down to the city, and I'm all excited, and I get to Henry's shop, and it's a little shop. And I get in there, and I'm starstruck. I'm talking to Henry Adler, and I asked him if he would teach me, and he said, "No, I'm sorry, I'm booked out." Mm-hmm. He said, "But here, I want you to go and talk to Sonny Igo," and he and Ed Shaughnessy had a studio right above his shop. So I went up there and introduced myself and signed in, and I started with Sonny, and I continued with Sonny for a few months, and I just had this need, and I can't explain why really, but I had a need to get to Henry Adler. So I would go down there every time I'd come into the city, because that was a wonderful place to be. You could hang out in that shop and see a whole lot of things going on that was happening in the city, and never, not to say that Ed Shaughnessy wasn't right there. He was, and Ed had invited a couple of students hanging out to go into watching him rehearse at the Tonight Show. We got to know that idea and saw Buddy playing the show, and it was just a great experience. So anyway, I asked Henry, "Please, can I study with you?" I think I even broke down into a little tear jag for a little bit, and
well played.
Yeah, and
well played.
Anyway, I did it, and I it's my story. So he said, "Okay, I will take you in," and I was thrilled. And for I think a good part of a year or so, I was under his tutelage, and Henry was the most amazing teacher. I'd had, I think, 7 teachers in my day, and he was the guy that kind of just dissolved into your whole being what he wanted to tell you.
Sure,
that kind of guy. I don't think it's a matter of, well, this guy has the best method right here, or this guy does this, or he's played with so and so. It had nothing to do with that. Henry just embraced you. It was that way.
Ted, there are certain, I like to call them intangibles, that we think that great players have. You sit there and go, well, there's a certain intangible, of course, that Elvin Jones has that you can't quite put your finger on. Or there's a certain intangible that Tony Williams has that you can't quite put your finger on. It's the same thing with teachers. There are some great teachers, but then there are some master teachers that have that combination of personality, aura, and the ability to communicate so articulately and to be able to really communicate directly to you. And that sounds like that's kind of what Henry had
right.
going on.
Amen. That's it. Yep.
To do a quick step back before we do the more with the Adler method, is when you were in Boston, that was right at the time that Alan Dawson was teaching at Berkeley. Did you do some or lessons with him?
I should have put the crying jag on him.
Yeah.
Because I did not get him.
Yeah.
I had Phil Magnano. I don't know if there's much about him or known about him. He was a percussionist, really, and I studied with him. But yeah, I really wanted to study with Alan Dawson. I mean, wow.
another guy.
Yeah.
Very similar to that type of aura, that type of communicator.
Yeah.
So now you started studying with Henry. This would have been still in the late 60s, I suppose, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'd say late 68 to probably 70.
Now, I know this is going to be an impossible task, but if you could sort of encapsulate the overall, we'll say, concept of the Adler technique, how would you relate that to everyone here on the show? Tell them what Henry Adler really offered.
Henry was very particular on how you would hold the drumstick. He would take great care in showing you exactly how to hold it and why. He would always explain why and demonstrate why. And he had very supple hands. He was a very loose all the time player. But when he had me do what he wanted me to do, my hand felt like a lobster claw. I felt like I was, going to cramp up. And I think I did a little bit, So it was very disarming, and it had to be just so. You have to follow that drop of that stick, and you have to follow it back. There can't be any wiggle woggle when it rebounds. It's got to come down and back. So I obviously I had some issues with my technique. For instance, my left, playing traditionally, my left, I was what you call pistoning. I was not turning my forearm correctly, and so I was actually doing the work with my arm, which of course some drummers would say that's just perfect, but no, I could not. In my technique that I managed somehow, I could not get a really even turn, sound, bounce, rebound out of my left. So he made sure that I turned that, like so.
The rotary motion.
The rotary.
Yeah. I always tell students it's the type of thing, if you're going to play traditional grip, the rotary motion is very similar to the motion you would make if you're turning a doorknob.
Exactly what he would say.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty good about myself right now, Ted.
You're doing well so far.
Yeah.
So far.
Doing okay. So now I imagine that he said, okay, Ted, we're going to do this. Grab my book.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So he started you out working out of the book, working out of the Buddy Rich Rudiment book.
That's right.
Did he also at that time tell you about how that book originated?
Yes.
Let's hear that, because that's going to be our real jump off point.
Yeah. And he reiterated some of this the last time I saw Henry, which I have a photo of here.
Oh, that's cool. You know what? I'm reaching across the table. I'm gonna scan this.
Yeah.
And I'll put it in the show notes. This will be awesome. I think I might even make this the actual picture for the podcast that shows up.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Awesome.
Very cool.
And that's Henry and I in 2004.
Gotcha.
And he was sharp as a tack. Let me tell you, he's all old and kind of shriveled up there, but man, he was just like you and I here, sharper than me, maybe as sharp as you.
So then somewhere along the line, the origination of this book actually came from naturally him teaching Buddy.
That's right.
And so,
well, that could oh man, I won't go into this, but I've had a lot of people yelling at me, Buddy Rich, I never taught Buddy Rich, and that's true. And Henry would be the first to say I couldn't teach him. He had everything he needed, and he needed to get to know how to read music, and I tried. He tried with Buddy, and it just didn't come out. He just didn't have an affinity with it.
Sure. So what did Henry do in conceptualizing how he wanted to write this book with Buddy in mind? In other words, what is the Buddy Rich part of this book then?
I'm going to use Ed Shaughnessy's explanation because it was so crystal clear. I got to know Ed a little bit, and he told me that Buddy would come to visit him. His studio was right above Henry Adler's shop, and he'd come to see Ed because they were old friends. Every time his band would come through, or he was in New York City, and they'd have lunch together. So Ed said that he came in one day, and he was standing in the studio, and he had to change his shirt to go out to lunch. Ed, so he says, Buddy, you've never showed me anything on the drums all these years that we've known each other. And I guess he had met Buddy when he was like 17. And now, it's in the Tonight Show. It's before they went out to the West Coast. So he said, you're not going to leave the room until you actually show me something. So, Buddy goes, oh, okay. He said, but he takes a drumstick and he goes over to the drum and he said, okay, Ed, watch this. And he picks up the stick and he drops the stick to the drum and boom, and picks it right up. And
he picked it up.
He followed the rebound right up.
Okay.
Touched it, boom, it's coming right out of the drum.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed goes, okay. He goes, oh, you didn't see it? Let me show you again. You know how snarky Buddy would be. So he does it again. Boom! Puts his arm all the way up to the ceiling after he hits it real quick, And then he goes into a tirade telling Shaughnessy that drummers today don't know how to get out of the drum. It's all about that. And he says to Ed, I know you do. You're a great player. He said, but basically this is what drummers don't understand. They're playing into the drum. They're hitting it like a hammer on a nail. And that's not what it is. So that just gives you a pretty good, simple idea about it,
Gotcha. And so basically then what Adler started doing is applying that technical concept
right
to all the different rudiments.
That's right. In a brilliant way.
Right. So in the way this book is constructed, is there a particular concept in these are the ones we have to learn first? Like there might be some that lend themselves to learn this technique a little bit more easily.
Yes.
And then we kind of go through the rest of them.
Yeah.
How's that organized?
It's incredibly user friendly. This book. Mm-hmm. I've taught it to 6-year-olds. All ages. And a lot of people just don't want to do it. You know how it is with a method. It's just just I'm going to watch you do it and I'll do it fine. Blah, blah, blah. And that's not it. What you have to do is be able to hold the stick properly, and then lift the stick. I know this sounds crazy easy, and it is. You lift the stick with your wrist. He shows you how to sit, so you're not sitting improperly. You sit, you sit up and you raise your wrist to the level of your elbow. You raise the stick, and then when you're required to just drop a full stroke to the pad or drum. And that's about it right there to start with. So it's just a drop. It's a gravity drop. Okay, boom. All right. I mean, just how easy is that, right? And you keep your fingers around, and you don't hold the stick tight at all, but you engage it with your thumb and your index. Mm-hmm. I have a way of showing this where you put your hand flat on the table. And you do kind of like a push-up with your fingertips sliding towards your knuckles without bending your main knuckles. And then you lift your hand off the table, and then you bend the knuckles in between. Your first knuckles from the base of your hand, and then you engage your thumb, the knuckle of your thumb to the first. Between the first and second knuckle, there's a space there where the bone is concave and it fits right in.
Right.
And then when you turn the hand over, you put the stick in, and then you put the pinky on the stick, and that's what got me. Mm-hmm. When I got that pinky on that stick, it was like I couldn't get it on there; it would slip off. And he was adamant that I kept that way up there, so I would cramp up in my palm a little bit when I was attempting to do this until it just eased up. But, everyone is saying this. Everyone has a different makeup in their hand. I mean, no two hands are alike. Mm-hmm. And this happened to be my hand. It was like that. I've taught the people that just do it right away. And some people just have to have it to the side. And I know you people cannot see exactly what I'm showing. But anyway, it was a very formal thing. But it was the fulcrum attachment from the thumb to the index that, in a very light way, that is getting the balance point of the stick. So that balance point is about 3/4 down, and that's where all your rebound happens. So when the hand drops and the stick hits, it your hand. We talked about this earlier. Your hand, when you pick it up, automatically the fingers retract when you lift your wrist up. If your palm's down, your wrist is limp, and you lift it up, and your fingers are relaxed, the fingers will automatically retract. So this is all involving that sort of thing.
Sure.
You can't separate those things. It is what it is. So what he tries to get everyone to do is to feel a very loose non-grip, but you're holding in the what's called the fulcrum on the balance point of the stick. So that has to get established. So that when the right hand, we're talking just you could say match grip. Mm-hmm. He did say to me, so when I the first day I sat down with him, he said, my goal here is to teach you how to play better traditional, which is what you're doing, and also play equally as well match grip. And I said, okay, I would do anything he said.
Sure.
So anyway, this method just starts with a drop to the drum. A drop, touch, and you get right back out. And he's very careful to say not to crimp the carpal bones in your wrist. Mm-hmm. So when you lift your hands are flat on a table and you lift your wrists up, they go and then to a certain point and they stop, and you can feel the carpal bones that are floating, the floater bones in your wrist. They will stop you. That's not a good thing.
Right.
So you don't want to go quite that far. So it's all very logical and simple, and I think easy if you follow the proper instruction of it.
Sure. And so after he goes through the basic technique, mm-hmm. what are the first rudiments?
Okay, first thing is done is to make sure that you have a downbeat in your foot on every 4 quarter notes in 4/4 time. Mm-hmm. So if your foot's on 1, 2, 3, 4, that's it. 1, and you start with your right hand, then your left hand. 4 strokes with your right, 4 with your left, and then 3 strokes with your right, 3 strokes with your left. Downbeat on 1, and then you go to 6 strokes with the downbeat still on every 3, and then you go to 8 with the strokes every 4 still, and the downbeat's on 1. So you just double it up. That's all. Very simple. And then the first actual rudiment is the most important exercise in the whole book, which is alternating single stroke roll.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the key, and that lays it down. Basically, that's the most important. I tell all my students, this is the most important thing I'll ever show you.
Oh, yeah. As I tell all my students, only 98% of everything we play are singles and doubles.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and also the other thing, the single stroke roll, arguably the most difficult rudiment to play.
I certainly agree. And there are 3 types of single strokes.
And they are?
Yeah, they are. The alternating single stroke roll, which everyone knows.
Right. Just right, left.
I call the next one. And this I really picked up working with Jim Chapin, because Chapin would say, well, there's this gated roll.
I gotcha.
Right? Everyone, we do that, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's if you break that up, you're really doing a double stroke with the right hand.
Interesting, yeah.
And the left hand's doing the same thing. You're just putting them in consecutive order. Right? Okay, and the down, if you start that with your right hand, the downbeat would be on your right? Or your left. Sounds
right.
exactly the same. Don't get caught in not doing the downbeat in your left hand. You're messed up for a long time. I'm a perfect example. You get it going in my right hand. Wow, that's really nice, And a couple of months later, I think I'm gonna do my left. Oh my God, and you have a crash. It just, I don't know, for me, everyone's different, but so just be careful if you. Of course, you're not gonna get this over the microphone, but so the third one would be the triplet single stroke.
Gotcha.
Right? Mm-hmm. Consecutive hits. And you take a hand away. It's,
Mm-hmm.
All right. So there's 3 strokes per hand. That's it. So these are sustained rudiments that we all need to do, and we're all probably doing them if you have any kind of success, but maybe not in such an orderly way. And you really should. I think it's very, very important.
So after studying with Henry, somewhere along the line, you had to get a call from, I don't know if it was from Henry or someone, that said, hey, let's revise the book.
Yes.
How did that come about? And that's quite an honor in itself just to get the call.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I still look at the book and I'm like, is my name on that book? I mean, not that I wasn't the right guy, because I taught out of it ever since I studied with Henry. Been since 1970. If I was teaching someone, I'd whip the book on them, and everyone that I had shown that to properly, and they ingested it, it transformed them just like it did me. I was completely transformed with that thing. It takes about, I'd say, in an average, about a good part of a year to get transformed into this system. So anyway, got to fast forward. Married, 4 children. I moved up to upstate New York, leaving a corporate job I had for a while as an art director. From Berkeley, I studied in the city, and then I went and played rock and roll for 10 years. Got my yayas out, Then I settled down, married the woman of my life, who's my manager, my everything. She is everything. And we had 4 beautiful children, two girls, 2 boys, and that's a large task, as you might know. It changes everything. So anyway, fast forward into about 2000, and I'm going to say 2 or 3. I had just played for a good part of 25 years with a piano trio at the Sagamore Hotel on Lake George, a 5-star hotel, and it was a wonderful experience. I probably was the first call drummer, although there was a lot of drummers doing the gig, but I probably worked an average 2-3 times a week for all, thousands of gigs at this place, where you would not only play in a tux, but if you didn't carry your drums in with your tux on, you were going to get berated. It was, you've done this, I'm sure.
Sure.
So, and playing in a hotel is interesting. I don't, Phil, if you're familiar with that, you're playing to a different audience every night. And we played in this room, beautiful room, called the Veranda, and it was, about 20-foot ceilings, maybe 25-foot ceilings, and glass enclosed on one side, and you overlook this beautiful Lake George. And all walks of life would come in. We'd play from 8 to 12. And all, I'm going to say jazz standards, but we'd play all types of music a piano trio could do. Basically an upright bass, acoustic piano, and a small drum set. So we just have a blast every night. We all got along famously, and you never know who you're playing for. And that's going to be my point here. One night, around 2003, I'm going to say, 2002, a gentleman came up to me, and he was very nice to me, and he said, he was English, mate, can I buy you a drink? I said, oh, sure. We sat down, had a drink. And in 3 minutes, he offered me this deal. So, I didn't know who the guy was, and he's very nice. I was told when I was setting my drums up that night, there was a big shot in the audience from the music industry. I was tipped off by the bartender, who I knew for many years, and he had never said anything to me at all, as it was, ever. He never came up to me ever before and said, Ted, there's a big shot coming in. I mean, there would be vice presidents, there would be actors, there would be musicians, people on the road coming in. But, all right, you see these people, it's fun, but I didn't know who this guy would be. And another night, I wasn't anticipating anything different, Anyway, so I sit down with him. His name is Barry Edwards. And Barry just loved my playing. And I was flattered. And I said, Barry, are you a drummer? He said, Yes, I am. He said, I used to be the house drummer at Ronnie Scott's in England for a while. I think, wow, this guy must be a really good drummer. He has to be a good drummer. And so then he led on that he's in the publishing business. And I said, well, where's your office? He says, all over the world. Well, he ends up being the biggest publisher in the world, president of Music Sales Corporation. And his secretary he was with, he ended up marrying. A couple years later, she was there, beautiful woman. And anyway, so I said, well, where's your office now? Are you in any particular spot? He said, well, I'm in New York City office at the time. And I said, well, you must know one of my former teachers, Henry Adler. He goes, Henry Adler? Wow, mate, I own the rights to the book, the Buddy Rich book. I said, oh, okay. He said, well, I studied at that with Henry. He goes, well, it's unfortunate the book's not doing well. I said, I know why. He goes, why? I said, it needs to be revised. He goes, why don't you do that, mate? And I think my jaw hit the table, and so I never called him after that. I was blown away. I was like, me revise that book? I mean, and it's funny he would say that because the reason I came out and says so is because every time I would teach the book, I would handwrite information in it because it did not exist, what Henry Adler had taught. And I would get comments through the years, why don't you write your own snare drum book? And my take was, look, there's so many snare drum books in the world. We don't need another snare drum book. This is it. This is the one.
Right.
And it's called the Bible of Snare Drum Books. It's the biggest selling snare drum book ever written.
Now, you just taught me something there. I had no idea.
Yeah. At that time, when I revised it. So a year went by, and he came back in, Barry Edwards, and we sat down, and he said, mate, are you interested at all? And I said, let's go for it. So I did, and he loved exactly what I did. And it's funny how it happened because one of my students is an art director, and I had been one myself, but he had all the bells and whistles, and he got a hold of what I was doing. He said, look, why don't you give me a layout, and I'll put a book together like it's already done. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow, okay. So I had it all ready, and I showed it to the publisher. He flipped out because they get stuff scribbled in the back of a napkin or pieces of paper. He goes, no one's ever done this. Oh, my gosh. Then he found out that I'm an illustrator. And he said, we'd like you to illustrate the cover. We want and I don't have the illustration here, but they paid me and I accepted an illustration I did of Buddy Rich at the snare drum. And at the last minute, they used the Leonard Feather photo, which is,
right, classic.
Mm-hmm. Which is, I would have loved to have had my illustration on the cover, but a little bit much. Who is this guy? So anyway, it was a whirlwind thing. It was a wonderful experience. Here I am in the heart of the city, New York City, and the Music Sales Corporation. They have this, they're on the top floor and in this building. I'm overlooking New York City. I never, ever in my wildest dreams thought that this would happen. I tried to make it as a big guy and big shot in the rock and roll industry when I was a young man, and almost did a number of times. But great stories too, by the way. But here I am, and it was just wonderful.
So from the time you took on the task, and you said, "Okay, I'll do this," how long did it take before the final revisions were sent in and it went to press?
Okay, it's important that I say at the point of me signing the contracts, I asked them, I said, have you told Mr. Adler about the revisions? Because I hadn't been in touch with him. And I said, well, no, we haven't. We own the rights to the book. I said, wait a minute. And I really had to step out. And, here I am talking to the president of the company. I said, look, Barry, if you don't tell him, he's going to sue you. He's going to sue me. Think about it.
Yeah.
You need to get in touch with him. He goes, okay, well, we'll see what we can do. I said, well, you're sending him residuals, aren't you? And he goes, well, yeah, let me see. Well, they couldn't find or didn't want me to call him. I don't think that was it. I think it was just, they just didn't think it was so important. But I told him I have to talk to him before we go through with this. And so I'm back home, upstate New York, and I'm right next to Albany, New York. And I see Jay Payne is going to be playing in town with his organ trio, and I love organ trios. I've done a lot of that work. And so I go to see Jay Payne. I'm sorry, I meant to say Jim Payne.
Right.
Sorry. Mm-hmm. Who wrote Give the Drummers Some. Right. Great author. Well, I replaced Jim in my first full-time rock band in 1969-70 when I was just about finishing up in New York City. I joined this band in New Haven, Connecticut called Jim Ground, and he was the drummer, and I was replacing him, and he was moving into New York City. So I got to know him, and I said, man, you got to check out Henry Adler, and I showed him a little bit what Henry does. Oh, Jim ended up not only studying with Henry, becoming a close friend of Henry's. So when I got to him, he's playing now in his trio. I hadn't seen him all these years. Two bald guys sitting down at the bar, looking at each other. Wow, look at you! And I told him what I was doing. He said, "Oh man, that is incredible." I said, "Is Henry alive?" He goes, "Well, yeah, I talked to him 3 days ago." So he gives me Henry's addresses, and I'm kind of ashamed to say that I never kept in touch with him. I mean, I got along with him famously, but I think when I was studying with Henry, I was so at awe, and I just never thought about following up with him. I just didn't, and I should have. I should have studied, by the way, another 5 years with him. Mm-hmm. I should have. And I think that was, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I called Henry Adler on the phone, and he said, "Who?" I said, "Ted Mackenzie." He said, "All right, well, how can I help you?" I was heartbroken he'd forgot me, but here's the guy who'd been teaching out of the city longer than I've been alive.
Right.
And I told him, and there's this long silence on the phone, and my heart rate started going up, and he said, "Okay, just send me what you got, and we'll talk later." He hung up the phone. He was upset, and I was upset. I'm thinking, oh my gosh. But now you can see, this was his baby. This book, although he had helped to publish many, 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 many books. Henry has his own publishing business. Mm-hmm. So we sent him the already looking like it was already published book in the mail. And I think that probably took him aback a little bit, because it had the first 3 or 4 lessons established. It looked like it had been printed already.
Right.
So I didn't hear from him in a week. I FedExed it down the next day, after I talked to him on the phone. And I'm sure it was probably a little bit much. I'm just guessing. But so I finally called him back, and I said, "Henry, did you get my mail?" And he said, "Yes, I did." I said, "Well, what'd you think?" And there was this pause. And he said, "Well, it's very good," he said, "but I think you're saying too much. I need to help you a little bit with it." I said, "Awesome."
That was what you were looking for.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the biggest part of the whole deal was right there, that he would give it his blessing, mm-hmm. and he would kind of coddle it and pass it on. So he just taught me, because I never, produced anything like this before. By the way, I'd been an art director in the corporate world for 10 years. I ran $15 million worth of print a year.
Sure.
I got into a lot of it. And I had, I was an art director. I had people coming in. I was telling them what to do. I never had a project like this. A drum student, howbeit a drum student, that I was teaching at the time. I mean, it's all just tied in. I'm a believer. I believe in the Lord. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I can't hide it, because there's certain things happen in everyone's life that you have to look at it and go, how did that happen? all these things came together like that for me. All right, so he finally approved it, and it probably took. I'm trying to put my mind around all these things that happened. I think from the time I gave my final outline to the publisher after Henry and I agreed it was good, it probably took, I don't know, 4 months, 5 months.
That actually was quicker than I thought. You must have really spent some time on it.
Oh, I did.
Yeah. Because almost everyone that I know that's done any type of writing and or revising on things, it is normally measured in years.
Yeah.
So you must have really buckled down on that thing.
Yes, I did. And when I did the follow-up, they gave me a little bit of time, and I was freaking out because, that book could have been 500 pages. They only wanted 125.
Right.
But it was tough. But
Yeah.
When I was doing the snare drum book, I actually lost the whole file in the computer at one point. I actually had it all in, boom, lost it. Then I panicked big time.
How did you get that back?
I just hour upon hour upon hour.
Oh, then okay. So it wasn't gone. In other words, it was.
No, it was in my head. I had copy, but it was like, it was just all I had finalized was gone out of the computer.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, somewhere along the way, also there was the decision, I suppose, by Barry Edwards that we were going to do some accompanying DVDs.
That was my idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, just give us a little bit of a run through of how that process happened.
Well, the book, as thorough as I think it was, although I probably would have described it a little bit more, but Henry was right. You don't need all the verbiage around everything like showing it, but it just needed a little bit more coddling, So, after teaching the method for so long, I felt that the DVD would be a real comprehensive way to show this off, to show it right. And I think that's what convinced the publisher when I said, look, we need to show this thing. And unfortunately, I couldn't get every lesson in. The DVD would not contain it. There's, 83 exercises, and you go through them. You go through it two ways: non-bounce and bounce. I hadn't explained that yet, but so when I did the DVD, I started it and showed, I'd say 3/4 of the Rudiments non-bounce, playing match grip, because most everyone plays match grip today. And then I showed the second stage, which is the bounce out. You're getting more freedom of bouncing with traditional grip. So that worked well, I think. And when you take a look at it, I think you'll agree. It's very, very dogmatic, straight ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you already let the cat out of the bag a little bit here, and so I want to go ahead and go down that path. There was a logical extension to this book, and that is to take the exercises on snare drum on one surface.
Right.
And now let's write a book about applying this to the full kit, to the full drum set.
Right.
How long did it take you guys to realize after we did the revision of this that, hey, this is where we need to go next?
Well, Barry, it's funny. I'm going to say I have an idea for another book, but no one seems to care so much now. Mm-hmm. But in those days, because it's such a big deal to revise this book, they asked me. Actually, they asked me when I went to do the DVD. They flew my wife and I to Las Vegas. We did the DVD in Vegas because that was their where they like to work out of. And they said, "Is there anything else you would like to do?" And I said, "Yes. I'm got this way of developing the hands that works very well using wire brushes and as a resistance program method." And he said, "Great, we'll do that while you're there." And I'm like, my gosh, I'm going to be there 3 weeks. So I had to get that organized in 3 weeks, go there, and then sit in front of the camera and put it up, which was nerve-wracking for me.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the day after I did the recording for the DVDs. So it was like, oh my gosh.
There's a big difference in there between sitting there conceptualizing and maybe even teaching a technique, and then knowing that you're going to have to present it on camera to be preserved for our lifetime and many others.
Yeah, there's something very frightening for you people who have not done this, where you're sitting behind the camera knowing that this is, like you said, Phil, this is it. Mm-hmm. Here it goes, and it's, captured in time. Here we go. Boink. And yeah, I had to get that organized and get it just so. And I've that was when I was just obviously developing a method per se as something you could buy. It had always been, the way I was using it was to help the student progress through the snare drum book itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually for people who, not everyone wants to do the snare drum book. Every student I would get in would not go, I want to do that snare drum book. Well, they might want to, and then I get them started on it, and they're just not doing it. And if they're not doing something that has to be done a certain way, I just put them onto another thing. I do not drag them through it or say, you can't study with me anymore because you're not doing what I say. I put them into the brush routine then, and they get not the same quantity, but they get the same quality through the brush method.
Right. And just so we can clarify this also, the brush method in the DVD that we have in front of us here, it's called the Ultimate Drummer's Workout is what it is. Yes. And so we will, in the show notes and towards the end of this podcast, tell you guys where you can get all this, where you can also view it. We'll also put it in the show notes where you've got a link you can click on to get to it as well.
Right.
So, Ted, on the drum set book that you wrote, I know that when we had our first conversation about doing this show, you were saying that, of course, it being the logical extension of this, that this is a book that it kind of wrote itself.
Absolutely.
How long did it take you to do that? Because I know, again, just even in this podcast, you said, hey, this book could have been 500 pages long. It's basically a lifetime study, that sort of thing.
Yes, right.
You had to really conceptualize, okay, I've got to get this in, got to get this method in, I've got to get these concepts, this technique in to 130 pages or 125 pages. How long did it take you to put that together?
Well, I think I was heading towards a 4-month, 5-month window. Unfortunately, I found out I had cancer during that procedure of it, and so I was given more time. Yeah, which was nice. I actually filmed the DVD for it, and had a break and have an operation to take care of it, which I'm cancer free.
Yes.
But it was another daunting part of my life, having that kind of pressure and having to go through all that. But did you want to know about the
absolutely
the book, how it came to be? I got the idea and felt compelled to do it, and called Barry and said I had this idea to put all these rudiments around the drum set, and he was just right on it, right from the get-go. And I explained it to him, and I gave him a pretty good layout how it was to be done, and then we proceeded. The way the book works is that every rudiment. Let's start with like the 3-stroke rough. That's really the first rudiment after the alternating single strokes. A rough is, Henry Adler would say, it's just part of a single stroke. It's 1, 2, 3, rest. That's it. Alternating. Right, left, right, left. So when you do the rudiments, and this is just an example of one, you would play them without bouncing the stick, just to get that right? So it'd be full strokes, drop, snap, drop, snap. And then when you put an accent on it by a little touch of the fulcrum. And I mean just a little, if I was come over there and pinch your cheek there, Phil, it would be like, oh, you did? Oh. And I'm sure you do this when you play. And that's enough volume to tap out the drum if you do it properly. And this is what blows a lot of people's mind. You mean that's as loud as the drum's going to get? That's it. And you can get that same volume from half stroke or quarter stroke if you're good enough at what you're doing, even from a ghost note
level. Right, sure.
Right. So with that said, when you bounce out the rudiment, then is da 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 da. You would naturally play an accent on the end, and then you put it on the front. You could put it in the middle if you want,
right.
But generally that's what you're doing with these rudiments, and of course with the downbeat in the foot. Because if the downbeat's not there, you cannot, I think, mentally work your rudiments properly in any given situation.
It creates a certain reference point.
Reference point. Thank you. Yeah.
That's where it is, right.
Right. So I took the rudiments and I would play them on the snare drum first, get the accent. And where the accent is, let's say I start on my right, left, right. Boom, boom, pop. There's the accent. Okay, I'm right-handed, so I take that to the floor tom. Boom. And then left, right on the snare, back to the snare, left and right on the snare. And then left comes up for the accent to the high tom.
Okay.
Boom, 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 boom. Well, then I reverse it. I put the accent on my right hand on the floor tom. Boom, tat, tat. And the tat, tats on the snare drum. Boom, tat, tat. Doom, tat, tat. Boom, tat, tat. Doom, tat, tat. So now I combine those, da-da-boom, 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 boom-ba-da, 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 boom-ba-da. So there's a nice little jag right there, okay? So then I reverse that. I go to the toms, dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, and I put the accents on the snare drum, dun-dun-ba, dun-dun-da, and then I reverse it, da-dum-boom, da-dum-boom. All right? Then that's a nice little turnaround. So I call these turnarounds, so you turn those things around, you're not really changing anything, just changing the accents and moving a little different. Okay, then that accent goes perfectly around the kit. Right, left, right to the high tom, left, right, left to the floor tom, right, to the snare drum, left, right, left. Then you start again on the snare drum. Da-da-da, boom-da-doom, da-da-dum, da-da-da, da-da-da, boom-da-doom, da-da-dum, da-da. Then you go the other way. Da-da-da, dun-dun-dun, da-da-dum, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da. You can whip it around the drum set. I mean, and then you take this thing and you split it up. You go right on the floor, left on the snare, boom, da, boom, boom, da, and then you put the left on the top, da, boom, da, right on the snare drum, do the same thing. So you're going boom, ba, boom, da, 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 and then you do the two times, do, 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 da, 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 do, 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 da, 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 do, 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 da, 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 da. Okay, then you take your downbeat on your right foot. Keep your hi-hat. It's very important you rock the heel and toe on the hi-hat while you're doing this. So you have a reference of the heel. On most of these exercises, on the 2 and the 4, we'll say. 1, 2, 3, 4, hi-hat. Okay.
Heel on 1 and 3, hi-hat,
right.
chick 2 and 4.
So that's your downbeat reference. But you're hearing a subdivision. Everything's subdivided when you play drums. So that's going on. So you take the foot now, and you put it on the rest of the rudiment. Right, left, kick. I'm sorry. Right, left, right, kick. Left, right, left, kick. Then you do all those other exercises with the kick filling in. And you've got something you probably have not done before, maybe.
Sure.
Then you take the rudiment and you substitute the right foot for your right hand in the snare drum. And then you do it with your left hand, and then you change the hands and alternating between the kick. Okay, so now we're getting into a world that doesn't look like anything you've done before. And this goes on, and it's inexhaustible, really. It's a vocabulary that a lot of us find but don't have necessarily in an orderly way where you can really map it out.
Sure, and hence your reasoning that, hey, this could have been a 500-page
Yes.
book. It really could have been an inexhaustible volume.
So I get all those rudiments down like that in the book, but I trailed a couple of pretty well complete ideas, although, Phil, you probably look at this and go, you could have done this and that. Well, that's right.
Of course.
But I could not attach those ideas to every rudiment because then it would be 500 pages.
Right. But the savvy student will know that you take any kind of method, such as even like, let's take syncopation, for example. There's another method that was written a certain way, not necessarily ever intended to be interpreted on drum set, and the many hundreds, if not even thousands of ways that you can interpret it. Same thing goes for your book.
Yeah.
Same thing. You can take these rudiments and pretty much your imagination is the limitation on it. I mean, we hadn't even gotten to the standpoint of talking about how you could even incorporate even sound effects, cowbells, wood blocks, all kinds of different sound sources. It's endless with that. I know.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So I want to reiterate also something that you and I talked about prior to turning on the microphones, is that all three of these different books, DVDs we're talking about, they're companion pieces to one another.
Yes, they are.
They all work together.
Right.
And I think you even said something along the line that even the DVD, you could even consider it almost tying the other two books together with that.
Yeah, it's like a glue to me.
Yeah, right. So that's one of those things that I think it's important for everybody to realize, is that they all work hand in hand with that.
Right.
Now, one thing I want to take a little bit of a turn on something here, and we've already alluded to this at the beginning of the show, but I think it's an interesting point and an interesting topic to talk about sort of the realism and sort of like what the state of print media is, and even for that much DVDs. In other words, what is it like to be in the publication world? Because I'll guarantee there are people that are listening to this that have thought about writing books, thought about writing methods, thought about doing DVDs and that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. What's your experience with this, Ted? Because you got more experience than anybody that's been on the show as far as writing books.
Can you narrow that down a little bit?
For example, let's just break it down to let's take in particular the second book that you wrote, okay, the one about applying the rudiments to the set that we just talked about.
Around the kit.
When you went to Barry Edwards, there had to be some sort of an idea as far as okay, look, we're going to, in this first edition, we're going to publish, or we're going to print 1,000 of these or 500 of these. Do you know roughly what that was? Also, what are the expected sales of something like that? And then also, naturally, what would be your cut on something like that percentage-wise? Did you get an advance up front?
Yeah, I did. I can't put it. My mind doesn't work in those directions. I wish my wife was here. We did get an advance. I think it was probably a couple of grand. Uh-huh. There's not a lot of money involved with this stuff. I mean, I like to say, well, the snare drum book is probably the best-selling snare drum book, but it's not Stephen King,
Right.
And it, by the way, it was selling gangbusters when it was first revised, and then the internet, all that overtook everything, and so most publications are not doing what they were doing 10, 20 years ago. They're just not. I'm not sure that's answering your question, but
well, let me ask you: do you know, on the first run of these books, were there maybe 1,000 done, or 500, or?
I wish I knew that. I should know that, having been in the business. I can get back to you on that and tell you later what it was.
I always think it's fascinating to bring this type of information to the show, mm-hmm. because I know there's a lot of misconceptions about the industry that we're in. There used to be the old misconception about the different manufacturers in our industry, about how many people work at different factories and, what they actually put out. Just as a side note to that, I'll tell you this. When we did the Gretsch show, when we went down to Ridgeland, South Carolina, I just started asking some friends, some people that I knew. I was like, how many of you people do you think actually work making Gretsch drums in the factory? You wouldn't believe the answers that I got. You wouldn't believe. Some people were going, not that many, maybe 700. You know,
I'm laughing because I've been there.
So, yeah, and there's and right now, which is this is a massive halcyon for Gretsch right now. There's 23 people that are putting those drums together right now. 23 people, and it's hard for people to wrap their head around just what a small industry we're in, what a niche industry we're in.
Yes, it really is. Yeah.
And so when I talk to people like with John DeChristopher, who was with Zildjian, and we were talking about how many people work there, and that's one of the bigger, bigger operations. And same thing with like Chris Brady at Aquarian. He's like, oh, there's about 70 people that work here.
Yeah.
One of the biggest drumhead manufacturers in the world.
Yeah.
And
it's
that's how many people work there.
And they have didn't they put some of it in Mexico as well?
They might have. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I've been to Zildjian as well. It's it's fascinating when you get there. I went to the original factory, and you walk in there, and you think you're in some way back in the Industrial Revolution. It's like sparks flying and molten this and that, and then people running around with these big gloves on, and not many people.
Right. It is fascinating. So that's why I thought it would be interesting to kind of draw that comparison of how you were going. It's not Stephen King money. There's no $1 million advances for these
not at
things.
all.
And we're not talking about selling, 5 million copies of a book or, that type of thing.
I think I've probably made $25,000-$30,000 in the past 15 years, roughly, which is wonderful. I mean,
yes,
wonderful. But it's not, like you say, huge
right.
amount of money.
That is a fantastic number to put on the show, though. I mean, thank you very much, Ted, for bringing that
to
our attention. That's really cool. I have a quick story to tell you about the publishing industry that I think that you'll find it absolutely fascinating. I'll show you also after the show if you'd like to see it. About 15, maybe 20 years ago, I bought a book that was written by Vernel Fournier. I think it's the only book he ever wrote. Small book. Just a book had 50 pages in it. Mm-hmm. There are arguably the most egregious print errors, notational errors, incredibly blatant errors that if anybody even did a cursory look at it, you would realize that there are not 14 beats in a 4/4 measure, right? And I'm being 100% serious.
I know.
Right? So I thought, you know what? I'm going to be the hero here. I'm going to email this company, and I'm going to go, guys, you got to get it together on this. Boy, I'll tell you what, I was put in my place. About a week later, I got a response back saying there will absolutely be no corrections made to this book until the first run of print was completely sold out. And then we will take a look at it if we decide to do a secondary publishing of it. Because I suppose the whole engraving process or just the revision process of being able to do something like that at that time is incredibly cost prohibitive. Yes. So that'll tell you a little bit about that. That's as
exactly
well.
Right.
So, well, Ted,
I at some point
Sure.
I'll have another, maybe after we're done, I've got a great story about this.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's do this as we start to kind of power down a little bit. Why don't you just tell us, just in general, about anything you want to promote and where people can find your books and where people can find your DVDs, CDs, what have you. And then again, I'll reiterate that we will put this in the show notes for you to be able to click on those as well.
Okay. Hal Leonard is the distributor. HalLeonard.com is a good source. Amazon.com, of course, is a good source. And I had discussed with Hal Leonard that, like you said, Phil, and I thank you for that this is really a package. It's like a method package. It's the Ultimate Drummer's Workout DVD. When it was put up, and they gave me the final product, I said, there are not brushes on the front of the cover of this, and they no, well, no rock drummer will ever buy this if they see brushes in the front of it. Well, I think that was a big mistake. Okay, so that kind of got a bump, and when they put it up to sell, I had to call Hal Leonard. I said, look, you've got to at least put the two books together. They would have the Buddy Rich snare drum book on one section and then Buddy Rich's Rudiments around the kit on another. I said, these are, companions. One's a follow-up book. And I said the Ultimate Drummer's Workout is the glue that holds everything together. That should come first. Oh, well, they still haven't done it.
Right.
And it's a shame, but that's the way it is. But the brushwork, like I alluded to earlier, it is the simplest thing to get and the right thing to get someone started on, because it gets the muscles in shape, whoever you are, and whether you're an advanced player or not, beginner. And I wouldn't do it with someone too young necessarily, unless they're doing it exactly right. And if you overdo it, you can strain yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think many drummers probably have done that in the past without using the brushes. But when you do this the way it's supposed to happen, and you do too much of it, it's like anything you do in a resistance program, lifting weights or push-ups, whatever it is, you can overdo it. So it has to be done in an orderly way. And once you break in, you will be good forever and a day. And it only takes minutes to warm up where it might have taken you an hour. It's a great advantage.
Well, we want to make sure that we give the actual names of the books also. I want to first start out with the DVD, because you just mentioned that it's a great place to start before you go even to the Adler book that you revised and then your drum set book.
And it's only $15.
So, and it's called The Ultimate Drummer's Workout for All Drummers by Ted Mackenzie. And then when we go to the Buddy Rich book, the original book by Adler, it's Buddy Rich's Modern Interpretation of Snare Drum Rudiments, and then Ted, your book is Buddy Rich's. Let's see, that's we want to do Rudiments around the kit.
There's one that's without the DVD,
right?
And then there's the double DVD version.
Double DVD version, again available on Amazon, and then the book that Ted wrote regarding the rudiments around the kit. It's Buddy Rich's Rudiments Around the Kit by Ted Mackenzie, and there's a DVD edition with that as well. And again, like I said, we will make sure that we put all the different links in the show notes. Ted, we could probably literally sit here and do another couple of hours on this entire thing. Maybe we'll do a part 2 of volume 2 of this. Right?
I'll come back.
Yeah, you're just down the road now. That's great.
Right.
That's fantastic. So, guys, reach out to Ted. He'd love to hear from you. As always, we appreciate you listening to the show. If you want to reach out to us, and you guys certainly do, head on over to www.drummersweeklygroovecast.com. There at that site, that is everything Drummers Weekly Groovecast. You can listen to every one of our episodes, our mini episodes of Accountability Thursday. We have all of our videos that are there as well. You can interact with us on social media. You can manage your subscription. And if you want to email us, there's an email form there as well. So please reach out to us. If you have a few minutes also, we would greatly appreciate it if you share this show with your friends. Even if you don't like them, go ahead and send your friends an invite to listen to the show. And any reviews on iTunes would be greatly appreciated. Stop by there and give us 5 stars when you get a few minutes. Ted, once again, absolute pleasure having you here. I don't think this is going to be the last time we see you.
Oh, thanks, Phil. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We will see you next Monday, and then see you on the first and third Thursdays of the month for Accountability Thursday. See you soon.